The lake lay at the edge of town like a mirror of the sky. On bright mornings it shone silver, and on quiet evenings it looked like a sheet of gold. The townspeople loved it, and many had grown up running down the dirt path to its waters, splashing through its shallows and listening to frogs croak when the sun sank behind the hills. For Sam, the lake was not only a pretty view or a place for fun, it was his anchor. Sam was a man with strong shoulders but hair turned white. He had served his country for decades in the military. His years of service had left marks on him, some visible, some deep inside. But Sam carried himself with calm pride. He lived simply now in a small house not far from the lake. What he loved most was to spend hours near the water, sitting in a folding chair with a fishing rod in hand, breathing fresh air that reminded him of freedom. Almost every week, Sam invited his 3 closest friends to join him. Tom, tall and lean, had once been a mechanic in the service. Bill, shorter and rounder, had a voice that could still carry across a field when he told stories. And Ray, the quietest of the group, had seen the hardest battles but rarely spoke about them. Together, the 4 men had built a bond in their younger years that time could not break. The lake was their meeting ground, their safe place where no one judged them and no one hurried them. On a sunny afternoon in early summer, the men gathered as usual. The lake shimmered under a wide blue sky and dragonflies darted across the surface. Sam had set up a couple of folding chairs and Bill had brought a cooler filled with cold drinks. The men's rods were lined up, lines cast into the water, bobbers floating quietly. Bill chuckled as he opened the cooler. "Sam, you never bring the right snacks." "Lucky I'm here." He pulled out sandwiches wrapped in paper. Tom grinned. "As long as they're not those dry crackers you call lunch, I'll take one." Ray said nothing, only gave a small smile as he adjusted his fishing line. Sam leaned back in his chair. "You fellows complain too much. Out here, even dry crackers taste like a feast." The men laughed. And for a while there was nothing but the sound of their voices mixing with birdsong and the gentle splash of water. They spoke about old times, the long marches, the dusty camps, the way they used to share jokes in hard moments just to keep going. They teased each other kindly, remembering the mistakes of youth and the times when luck had kept them alive. "Remember that sergeant who shouted at me for falling asleep on watch?" Bill asked, chuckling. "I told him I was only resting my eyes." "And you nearly got us all punished," Tom said, shaking his head. "But then you cracked that joke about him needing a louder alarm clock, and even he laughed." Ray finally spoke. His voice was low. "Sometimes I think those laughs are the only reason we made it through." The others nodded. There was truth in his words. Their friendship had been their shield. It was during this peaceful hour that trouble arrived. A sharp, cutting voice broke the calm. "Excuse me, excuse me!" "What are you doing here?" The men turned. A woman was standing on the path leading down to the lake. She wore neat clothes, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. Her chin lifted as if she owned the ground beneath her feet. Her name was Karen, and many in the neighborhood knew her well. Karen was part of the HOA, the homeowners association that had taken charge of rules around the community. She was known for her strict tone, her endless lists of complaints, and her belief that everything had to be done her way. If someone left a flower pot the wrong color on their porch, Karen wrote a notice. If a child rode a bicycle too fast on the sidewalk, Karen was there with a warning. People often lowered their heads and tried to avoid her, for she seemed to thrive on arguments. Sam sat upright but remained calm. "We're fishing," he said simply. Karen stepped closer, her heels clicking against the dirt as if she wanted the sound to be heard. "This is private property. Only residents and their registered guests are allowed here. You men are not on the list." Tom's jaw tightened. "We've been coming here for years. No one ever stopped us before." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Well, times change. Rules must be followed. I don't see your names on the approved roster. That means you are trespassing. Pack up your things and leave immediately." Bill let out a low whistle. "Trespassing?" "Lady, we're sitting on folding chairs with fishing poles. We're not robbing a bank." Karen ignored him. She straightened her back even more. "Rules are rules. The lake is for community residents only. If you're not registered, you don't belong here." Sam looked at her steadily. His eyes, though aged, still held the strength of a man who had once faced real enemies, real challenges. "I've lived near this lake longer than you've been telling people where to stand," he said softly. "We're not harming anyone," Karen smirked. "That doesn't matter. If you don't leave, I'll call the board, and if needed, I'll call the authorities." I suggest you cooperate." The air around them grew tense. The lake, moments ago so calm, now seemed to reflect the storm brewing between the woman and the men. Ray leaned closer to Sam and whispered, "Should we just go? It's not worth a fight." Sam shook his head slightly. "Not today." But instead of shouting, instead of letting anger rise, Sam gave Karen a polite smile. "We'll see about that." Karen seemed satisfied with what she thought was victory. She turned quickly, heels hammering against the path as she left, her posture sharp like a soldier on parade. For a long moment, the veterans sat in silence. The water lapped gently against the shore. Somewhere in the trees, a bird began to sing again as if to fill the heavy air. Bill broke the silence. "That woman's got more bark than a forest." Tom frowned. "She's not bluffing, though. If she says she'll call someone, she probably will." Ray's hands tightened on his fishing pole. "I don't want trouble, Sam, but I don't want to be pushed around either." Sam looked at his friends. His voice was calm, steady, the same voice he had once used when giving orders in harder days. "We fought for this land. We gave years of our lives. We lost brothers who never came back. And now we're told we don't belong by a woman with a clipboard?" The others listened, their expressions serious. Sam continued, "This lake is more than water. It's where we find peace. It's where we remind ourselves that life is still good. If she thinks we'll just walk away, she doesn't know us at all." The men nodded slowly. None of them shouted. None of them raised fists. They didn't need to. Their quiet agreement was stronger than anger. As the sun dipped lower, turning the water to bronze, the veterans began to pack up. Not because Karen had told them to, but because the day was ending. They folded their chairs, gathered their rods, and lifted the cooler. Their steps were slow but firm as they walked back up the path. Sam's mind was not on leaving. His mind was on the next move. He knew Karen would not stop with warnings. She would push harder, bring others from the board, maybe even try to ban them with written notices. But Sam had faced bigger bullies in his lifetime, and he had always found a way to stand tall. As they reached the parking lot, Bill asked quietly, "So what now, Sam?" Sam looked out over the lake one last time before answering. His voice was low, almost a promise. "Now we remind her who she's dealing with. She wants to play rules? We'll show her respect. But we'll also show her that we don't back down." The men exchanged looks. They had seen that fire in Sam before, many years ago, in places far from the lake. It was the same fire that had carried them through long nights, harsh marches, and endless uncertainty. The battle might be different now, but the spirit was the same. And as the sky turned red with the setting sun, Sam knew one thing for certain. Karen's attempt to drive them away had lit a spark she would not be able to put out. Because when veterans stand together, even the strongest walls of control cannot hold them back. The next morning, the air over the lake was cool and mist hung low on the water. Birds stirred in the trees and the quiet ripples moved like soft whispers. But Sam was not at the lake this time. He was sitting at his kitchen table with a notebook open, a cup of coffee steaming in his hand. He had slept little the night before. The voice of Karen had echoed in his mind, sharp and commanding, telling them to leave. He had thought about how she looked when she spoke, chin high, arms crossed, eyes filled with self-importance. She had not cared that the men were veterans, that they had given so much of their lives to the country. To her, they were simply not on the list. Sam was not the type of man to break rules for the sake of breaking them. He respected order. He respected fairness. But this was different. This was not about rules. It was about someone trying to take control of something that belonged to everyone. The lake was not a prize for one person to guard. It was a gift of nature, a place of peace. As Sam sipped his coffee, he began to write. His notes were not angry. They were careful, thoughtful. He wrote about the history of the lake, how it had been open for generations, how families had always come there without being stopped. He wrote about his friends, about how they were all retired veterans who only wanted to sit by the water, fish, and share memories. He wrote that no harm was done, no damage caused, only peace created. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. When he opened it, Tom stood there, holding a bag of groceries. "Morning," Tom said. "Brought some eggs. Thought we'd have breakfast together." Sam stepped aside to let him in. "Good timing. I was just writing." Tom set the bag down and raised an eyebrow. "Writing what?" "Notes," Sam said, tapping the notebook. "If Karen wants to play by rules, we'll meet her with rules. But not just her rules, the real ones. The fair ones. Tom sat down slowly, curiosity on his face. You're thinking of taking this to the HOA board, aren't you? Sam nodded. Yes, but not just that. We'll bring the town into it too. This lake doesn't belong to Karen, it belongs to the people. If she wants a fight, she'll get one, but the kind she cannot win. Tom smiled faintly. That's the Sam I remember. Calm on the outside, but always planning something. They cooked breakfast together, frying eggs and toasting bread. Soon Bill and Ray arrived as well, drawn by habit and friendship. They all sat around the table, plates before them, the smell of food filling the room. Sam explained his idea. We gather proof. We talk to families who've used the lake for years. We gather their voices, their memories. We write letters. We call for a meeting. We don't shout. We don't argue. We simply show that this lake is part of everyone's life. We'll stand together and she'll have no ground left. Bill's eyes lit up. I like it. A proper strategy. Reminds me of when we had to plan those patrols. Always one step ahead of the other side. Ray, who often stayed quiet, spoke with quiet strength. If we do this, we must do it with respect. No anger, no shouting. We prove with calm that we belong. Sam nodded firmly. Exactly. The men spent the rest of the morning talking through the plan. They listed names of neighbors who often came to the lake, families who picnicked there, children who learned to swim, old couples who watched sunsets. They spoke of the veterans in town, some younger, some older, who would surely stand with them. By noon, the notebook was filled with notes. Sam closed it and said, We'll begin tomorrow. That afternoon, the four men walked together through the neighborhood. They visited houses, knocked on doors, and spoke kindly to the people who opened them. At Mrs. Green's house, an elderly woman with kind eyes, they explained what had happened. She listened carefully, her hands resting on her walking stick. I've lived here 50 years, she said. My husband and I used to bring our children to that lake every weekend. Now I bring my grandchildren. No one ever told me it was forbidden. That woman is overstepping her place. You can put my name on your list. At another house, a young couple opened the door with a toddler clinging to the father's leg. When Sam explained their mission, the father shook his head. The HOA has been getting worse. They think they own everything. But we all pay our dues, we all live here. That lake is part of our lives too. We'll sign whatever you need. House by house, story by story, the men gathered voices. Each conversation added weight to their cause. Families, widows, couples, teenagers, many had memories tied to the lake, and nearly all of them were unhappy with Karen's attempt to take control. By evening, the notebook was thick with names and words of support. Back at Sam's house, the men spread the pages across the table. This is stronger than we hoped, Bill said, his voice proud. Tom added, People are tired of being pushed around. They just needed someone to stand up first. Ray looked at Sam. And that someone is you. Sam shook his head. No, it's all of us. We stand together. The next step came quickly. Sam called the HOA office and asked to be put on the agenda for the upcoming community meeting. The secretary hesitated but finally agreed. You'll have 10 minutes, she said. That's all I'll need, Sam replied. Word spread through the town. By the end of the week, everyone knew that Sam and his friends would speak at the meeting about the lake. People whispered in grocery stores, in churches, and coffee shops. Some were nervous about going against the HOA. Others were excited that someone was finally challenging Karen and her strict rules. Karen herself was not quiet. She walked through the neighborhood with her usual air of command, telling anyone who would listen that the lake was private and that Sam's group was breaking the rules. They're stubborn old men who think they can do whatever they want, she said loudly one afternoon in the community park. But rules are rules. They'll learn. When Tom heard about her words, he wanted to respond, but Sam stopped him. Let her talk. The more she shows her pride, the more people will see the truth. We don't need anger. We need patience. Finally, the night of the meeting arrived. The community hall was full, every chair taken. Families stood in the back, children sat on laps, and neighbors leaned against the walls. The air buzzed with whispers, with the weight of something important about to happen. At the front of the room sat the HOA board, 5 members, including Karen, who sat stiffly with papers before her. Her eyes darted across the crowd and her lips pressed into a thin line when she saw how many had come. Sam and his friends entered quietly. They did not rush. They did not push. They walked with the steady steps of men who had faced much more than a meeting. People nodded to them, Some even clapped softly as they passed. Sam carried his notebook. When his turn came, he stood at the front. His voice was calm, not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. "We are here to speak not only for ourselves," he began, "but for everyone who has loved this lake. We are veterans, yes, but today we stand as neighbors, as members of this town. We come here with respect." He opened the notebook and began to read. He shared the names of families who had spoken in support, the stories of children learning to swim, of elderly couples finding peace, of memories stretching back decades. He spoke of how the lake had always been free for the community, how no harm had ever come from its use, how it was part of their lives. The room was silent except for his steady voice. Even the children seemed to listen. When he finished, he looked directly at the board. "This lake is not a tool for control. It is a gift for all, and we will not allow it to be taken from us." Applause filled the room. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering softly, nodding with agreement. Karen's face turned red. She tried to speak, but her words were drowned out by the crowd. For the first time, her voice was not the loudest in the room. The meeting at the community hall had shaken the neighborhood. For the first time, the people had stood together and clapped against Karen's strict rules. For the first time, her voice had not been the final word. But Karen was not someone who gave up easily. In the days that followed, she grew sharper, more determined. She told anyone who would listen that Sam and his friends were dangerous troublemakers who wanted to destroy order. She walked from house to house with leaflets printed in bold letters, "Protect our community. Protect our lake." She said the veterans were disrespectful and reckless, and that the HOA needed to be stronger to stop them. Many people ignored her, remembering the calm way Sam had spoken at the meeting. But Karen found a few who still feared change, who worried about losing control of rules. She gathered them close, whispering that the veterans were trying to take over the neighborhood. Sam, however, stayed calm. He had expected Karen to strike back. At his kitchen table, he and his friends met again. "She's angry," Tom said, shaking his head. "I heard she's planning to push for new rules at the next board session. Rules that could ban fishing, picnics, even sitting at the lake without permission." Bill slammed his hand on the table. "That woman wants to turn the whole town into her personal kingdom." Ray spoke quietly, his voice steady as always. "Anger will not help us. We need patience. She will push hard, but if we stay calm, people will see the truth." Sam nodded. "Ray is right. Karen thinks this is about power. But for us, it is about community. We must not forget that." The men agreed to continue gathering support. They decided to write a letter not just to the HOA board, but also to the local newspaper. Sam believed that when a story reached beyond the small halls of the HOA, it gained strength. The next morning, Sam sat at his desk and wrote carefully. He described the lake, the way it had always been open, the memories tied to it. He explained how Karen had tried to ban them, and how the community had spoken together in support of fairness. His words were simple, clear, and full of respect. When he finished, he signed it with his name and the names of his 3 friends. They took the letter to the newspaper office in town. The editor, an older man with glasses, read it slowly. When he finished, he looked up with a smile. "This is powerful," he said. "People will want to read this. It's not just about one lake, it's about fairness, about standing up for what's right." A few days later, the letter appeared in the paper. Families read it over breakfast. Shopkeepers read it between customers. Students read it in school libraries. And almost everywhere, the reaction was the same: respect for the veterans and frustration toward the HOA's heavy hand. Karen, of course, was furious. She stormed into the next board meeting with stacks of papers in her arms. She waved them in the air, declaring that Sam and his friends were spreading lies. "They are trying to paint themselves as heroes," she cried. "But they are nothing more than rule breakers. We must put an end to this." The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some of them had been on Karen's side at first, but after the public support, they were no longer certain. One finally said, "Karen, maybe we should listen to what the community wants." The hall was full at the last meeting. "People clapped for them, not for us." Karen glared at him. "Are you saying we should let rules slide? Are you saying we should let chaos take over?" But deep inside, Karen was worried. She had never faced this much resistance. She had always believed that if she spoke firmly enough, people would obey. Now Sam and his friends had changed everything. Meanwhile, life at the lake continued. Families kept visiting. Children kept laughing in the water. Couples kept walking hand in hand along the shore. And Sam and his friends returned with their chairs and fishing rods. Each time they sat there, more people greeted them, thanked them, and even joined them for a while. The lake had become a symbol now, not just of peace, but of standing together. One Saturday, as the men sat fishing, a group of teenagers came by. Normally, teenagers might ignore older men, but these young people stopped and spoke. "We read about you in the paper," one boy said. "Thank you for standing up. My grandfather used to fish here before he passed away. I'm glad you're protecting the lake." Sam's heart warmed at the words. "The lake belongs to you as much as to us," he said kindly. "Take care of it and never let anyone take it from you." But Karen was not finished. A week later, Sam received a letter in the mail. It had the HOA stamp on the front. Inside was a formal notice declaring that he and his friends were banned from using the lake until further review. It accused them of disruptive behavior and failure to comply with regulations. Tom read the letter and muttered, "Disruptive? We were fishing quietly. If that's disruptive, then birds are criminals too." Bill growled, "This is nonsense. She's going too far." Ray looked at Sam. "What now?" Sam folded the letter carefully. "Now," he said, "we remind her again that we do not bow to unfairness. She wants to fight with paper? We will answer with unity." The men gathered the community once more. This time they invited not just neighbors but also veterans from surrounding towns. On the chosen evening, dozens of people came, filling the small park near the lake. Some carried flags, some held signs with simple words, "The lake belongs to all." Sam stood before them. He did not shout. He did not need to. His voice was steady, strong, carrying to the back of the crowd. "We are here because we believe in fairness. We are here because the lake has always been open for all to enjoy. We are here because no single person has the right to take it away." Cheers rose from the crowd. Karen appeared at the edge of the park, arms crossed, lips thin. She tried to speak, but the people did not listen this time. They listened only to Sam and to the voices of each other. For Karen, this was a nightmare. She had thought the notice would scare Sam into silence, but instead it had made him stronger. She went home that night with anger boiling inside her. She began to draft new rules, stricter than ever. Rules that would require identification cards to sit by the lake, fines for anyone without permission, and even locks on the gates. But Sam heard about her plan, and he was ready. Back at his kitchen table, he spoke to his friends. "She is building a wall, but walls cannot stand when people push together. We will bring even more voices this time. We will call for a vote. The board will have no choice." And so the veterans prepared again. They wrote letters, knocked on doors, and gathered signatures. This time, not only families but also business owners, church leaders, and teachers joined. The notebook filled thicker than ever, page after page of names. By the time the next HOA meeting arrived, Karen thought she had her strongest rules yet. But when she entered the hall and saw the crowd waiting, she felt her power slipping. Because this time the lake had become more than a body of water. It had become the heart of the community, and Sam was standing at the front ready to protect it. The town was buzzing with whispers long before the next HOA meeting. Some said Karen was preparing her biggest plan yet. Others said Sam had something even stronger waiting. The lake, once just a peaceful place of water and trees, had become the center of the whole community's attention. On the morning of the meeting, Sam rose early. He stood at his window, looking out at the mist drifting across the lake. His fishing rod leaned against the wall, but today was not a day for fishing. Today was a day for standing firm. He brewed a pot of coffee and set the table with papers, the notebook thick with signatures and letters of support. Soon Tom, Bill, and Ray arrived. Their faces were serious, but there was determination in their eyes. "She's going to try and push us out for good tonight," Tom said. Bill tightened his fists. "I say we're ready." "She won't scare us." Ray gave a calm nod. "We just need to keep our voices steady. Respect is our weapon." Sam poured coffee into 4 cups. "We fought wars with honor. We'll fight this battle the same way." As the day went on, more people gathered in quiet groups talking about what would happen. Families prepared to attend the meeting, some bringing small children, some carrying signs with simple words like fairness and community first. By evening, the community hall was packed again, more crowded than anyone had ever seen. Karen arrived wearing a sharp jacket, her papers clutched tightly. Her steps were quick, her eyes hard. She had been waiting for this moment. She marched to the front and took her seat on the board, her chin raised high. When the meeting began, the chairman read the agenda. Karen quickly raised her hand. "I propose we begin with the matter of the lake. It is urgent and cannot wait." The chairman sighed but nodded. "Very well. You may speak." Karen stood holding her stack of papers. She spread them across the table like a general laying out battle plans. "The lake has been misused," she declared. "Strangers have invaded. Rules have been ignored. Order has been lost. That is why I propose the following new measures. First, only residents with identification cards may use the lake. Second, any guests must be pre-registered with written approval from the HOA. Third, any violation will result in heavy fines. And fourth, gates will be installed around the lake to prevent entry without permission." Gasps spread through the crowd. Parents looked at each other in disbelief. Teenagers whispered angrily. Older couples shook their heads. Karen raised her voice above the noise. "This is for safety. This is for order. Without rules, there is chaos. If you truly care about this community, you will support these changes." She sat down with a sharp motion, her face flushed with pride, certain she had struck the final blow. The chairman looked uncertain. He glanced toward Sam, who was standing quietly near the front, holding his notebook. "Mr. Sam," he said. "You have the floor." Sam stepped forward. He did not rush. He placed the notebook on the podium and looked around the room. His gaze touched the faces of children, parents, grandparents, workers, teachers, veterans. He let the silence stretch until the crowd settled. When he spoke, his voice was calm but strong. "I have heard Karen's words. She speaks of safety. She speaks of order. But I ask you, has the lake ever been unsafe? Has there ever been chaos there?" Voices from the crowd answered, "No." Sam nodded. "The lake has been here longer than any of us. Generations have played, fished, and rested by its waters. Not once has it needed gates or guards. It has always belonged to the people. Always. And now someone wishes to put walls around it, as if peace must be locked away." He opened the notebook and held it high. "This is the voice of the community. Page after page, name after name. Families who love this lake, families who will not see it taken from them. This is not rebellion. This is unity. This is respect for tradition, for memory, for fairness." The crowd began to murmur in agreement. Sam continued, his eyes on the board. "We are not here to break rules. We are here to remind you of the purpose of rules. Rules should protect, not restrict. Rules should build trust, not walls. If rules become chains, then they are not rules, they are cages." The room erupted in applause. People stood to their feet, clapping and cheering. Karen slammed her papers against the table. "Silence," she cried. "You cannot let emotions decide. Facts matter. Rules matter." But her voice was drowned by the people's voices. A man from the back stood up. "My father taught me to swim in that lake. Are you saying he was a criminal?" A woman called out. "My children learned to ride their bikes on the path by that water. Are you saying they were breaking the law?" One by one, voices rose, each stronger than the last. Karen tried to shout them down, but the tide of the people was too strong. Finally, the chairman banged his gavel. "Order, order. We will vote." The board members whispered among themselves, clearly shaken. One by one, they raised their hands. 3 voted against Karen's proposal. 1 hesitated, then also voted no. Only Karen raised her hand for yes. The chairman declared, "The proposal is rejected. The lake will remain open as it has always been." The hall erupted in cheers. People hugged, children clapped, and families shook hands with Sam and his friends. Karen's face turned pale, then red. She gathered her papers quickly and stormed out of the hall, her heels echoing like angry drums. But outside, even she could hear the cheers behind her. She had lost. Sam turned to the crowd. He did not smile with victory. Instead, he raised his hand for quiet. "This is not about winning or losing. This is about remembering who we are. We are neighbors. We are family. We are stronger when we stand together. The lake is safe because of us, not because of gates or chains. Let us keep it that way." The people nodded, their hearts lifted by his words. That night, the veterans walked to the lake together. The moon shone on the water, silver and calm. They unfolded their chairs, cast their lines, and sat in silence. Around them, the world seemed peaceful again. Bill finally spoke. "You did it, Sam. You showed her what real strength looks like. Tom chuckled. She'll think twice before crossing you again. Ray looked at the lake, his eyes soft. It wasn't just Sam, it was all of us. The whole town. That's what made the difference, Sam smiled quietly. Yes, one voice is strong, but many voices together, they can move mountains. The men sat in peace, their lines drifting across the water, the lake calm and free. But deep inside, Sam knew this was not the end. Karen was not the kind to disappear quietly. She would try again, perhaps in another way. But whatever came, Sam also knew the truth. The people had found their strength. And when people stand together, no single voice, no single rule can silence them. The morning after the HOA meeting, the town felt lighter. The sun reflected off the lake, painting the water gold. Birds flew over the trees, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine. The veterans walked along the shore together, folding their chairs and carrying their fishing rods. The lake was calm, the way it had always been, and for a moment it felt as though nothing could disturb the peace again. But Sam knew better. Karen had not gone away quietly. She was still determined to take control. She had spent the night drafting new rules, meeting quietly with the few board members still loyal to her, and planning how to enforce stricter measures. Sam had anticipated this. He had told his friends, "Patience is our ally. Let her make the next move. We are ready." By mid-morning, Karen arrived at the lake with a small group of board members. She carried a clipboard and a stern expression. "I am issuing a formal warning," she said, addressing Sam and his friends directly. "If you do not comply with the HOA rules, I will have no choice but to call the authorities." Sam folded his arms, calm and steady. "Karen, we have already spoken at the board, and the community has spoken. We are following the law. We respect order. But this lake is for everyone, not just for control." Karen's jaw tightened. "That is not your decision to make. You will leave if you do not want trouble." At that moment, families began arriving at the lake. Children ran toward the water. Couples carried picnic baskets, and neighbors waved to Sam and his friends. More people appeared than Karen had expected. She looked around, realizing that the lake was no longer empty or quiet. It belonged to the town. Sam took a deep breath. "Karen, notice how many people care about this place. This is not rebellion. This is community. If you try to force your rules here, it will not be respected. We have neighbors, families, and friends watching. They are witnesses to fairness and peace." Karen raised her voice, frustration rising. "This is nonsense. Rules exist for a reason. You cannot ignore them." But Sam smiled gently. "Rules are not ignored, Karen. Rules are followed, but only when they are fair and just. The law supports the people's right to peaceful use of common spaces. You can attempt control, but you cannot control hearts." A man stepped forward from the crowd carrying a folder of documents. "These are signatures from over 200 residents who agree with the veterans. We support the lake remaining open as it has always been. We ask the board to respect our voices." Karen's eyes widened as she saw the folder. Over 200 names, neatly written, some accompanied by notes of support. She could not argue against the sheer number of people. Tom leaned closer to Sam. "Looks like the town is ready to back you all the way." Sam nodded. "They are not backing us. They are backing what is right." Seeing her influence slip, Karen tried one last tactic. She pointed to a group of teenagers sitting near the water. "And if anything happens, accidents, injuries, you will be responsible." "You are breaking the rules." Sam approached calmly, meeting her gaze. "Karen, accidents can happen anywhere, but your attempt to control this lake does not prevent them. It only separates people from nature. We have common sense, supervision, and community. Safety does not require gates or fences. Respect and care do." Karen's group whispered among themselves, realizing that Karen's threats no longer carried power. The community's support was too strong. Sam looked out over the lake. He saw the children laughing as they splashed in the water. He saw parents helping toddlers carefully along the shore. He saw neighbors smiling at each other. The lake was alive, safe and free. He turned to Karen one last time. "This is not a battle for power. This is a battle for fairness. And fairness cannot be forced. It is earned, shared, and respected. Today the lake remains open to all because the community has spoken, and we will protect it together." Karen's face flushed with frustration, but she knew she could not argue against the truth. The lake was no longer hers to control. With a stiff nod, she gathered her papers and walked away, the echoes of her heels fading into the distance. Sam's friends clapped him on the back. Bill smiled broadly. You really did it, Sam. Epic, just like the title in the papers. Tom laughed softly. She tried everything, and still the lake won. That's a good day, Ray nodded, looking over the water. It's more than winning. It's about standing together. That's the real victory. For the next few hours, the veterans stayed by the lake. Families continued to arrive, some bringing homemade treats, others carrying chairs to sit beside the water. Everyone greeted Sam, Tom, Bill, and Ray with gratitude. Some thanked them simply for standing up. Others shared memories of the lake, reminding everyone why it mattered so much. Sam took a moment to sit alone by the water. He cast his fishing line gently into the lake and felt the calm rush over him. The sun reflected on the ripples and the gentle wind carried a feeling of peace. He thought about the journey, Karen's initial attempt, her notices, the HOA meetings, the letters, and the crowds that had grown to support fairness. Every step had required patience, wisdom, and calm strength, and most importantly, it had required unity. The veterans had not stood alone. The town had stood with them. As evening approached, Sam's friends joined him. They carried chairs, set up the cooler, and sat together, casting lines into the water. The sound of laughter, soft conversations, and occasional splashes filled the air. Bill looked around and said, You know, this feels like old times. Only better, Tom nodded. We're not just fishing. We're protecting memories, peace, and fairness. That's bigger than any catch, Ray added. And that's something no rules, no notices, no gates can ever take away. Sam smiled quietly. It is true. Strength is not in power alone. Strength is in respect, in unity, and in standing for what is right. As night fell, the sky filled with stars reflecting on the lake's calm surface. Families left with smiles and gratitude. The veterans stayed a little longer, enjoying the quiet, the friendship, and the victory they had earned. Finally, they packed up their chairs and rods, leaving the lake as peaceful as it had been in the early morning. Walking back to their cars, Sam spoke softly to his friends. This lake will always belong to the people. Karen may try again, but now we know something important. When the community stands together, fairness cannot be taken away. Tom nodded, and she will remember today for a long time. Bill laughed quietly. I hope she does. Maybe she'll learn a little humility, Ray smiled, or at least respect. Sam looked back one last time at the moonlit water. He felt proud, not of himself but of everyone who had stood together. The veterans, the families, the neighbors. They had shown that courage was not always about fighting wars. Sometimes it was about standing firm for what is right, for peace and for fairness. And with that thought, Sam turned, walking back with his friends. The lake remained calm, the water shining under the moon, a symbol of victory, community, and respect that no single person could ever take away. The story of the lake. The veterans and Karen would be remembered in the town for years to come. Not because of conflict, but because of courage, patience, and unity. And for Sam and his friends, that was the greatest catch of all.